You know the guy, right? Jolly, red suit, sleigh, a whole team of reindeer. Santa Claus. We all know him. But what if I told you his story is way more complicated and, frankly, way more interesting than you think? To find the real Santa, we have to go on a pretty wild ride through history. A journey that involves saints, scholars, and yeah, even pagan gods.
Ah, that line. For so many of us, this is literally the sound of Christmas beginning. You hear it and you can just picture the whole scene, right? The stockings, the chimney, that magical feeling in the air. It feels like it's been around forever, like it's always been the story. But what if it hasn't?
Well, here's the thing. Almost everything we picture when we think of Santa Claus, the cheerful, toy-making, sleigh-riding icon, wasn't slowly pieced together over centuries. Nope, he was practically invented, almost overnight, by one single piece of writing. So let's start right there.
Okay, so our first stop on this historical journey isn't the North Pole. It's not even in Europe. It's a small newspaper in 19th century America. Because this is where an anonymous poem was published that would literally change Christmas forever.
So get this. On December 23, 1823, a newspaper called the Troy Sentinel publishes this poem. It was sent in by a friend of the author who didn't even put his name on it. And it just exploded. It was a total sensation. You got to remember, before this, ideas about who brought gifts at Christmas were all over the map. This poem gave everyone a single, incredibly vivid blueprint to follow.
And what's so wild is just how specific this blueprint was. I mean, think about it. The poem lays out everything we know. His personality, a jolly old elf. His arrival time, his exact mode of transport, even the specific number of reindeer. It gives us the chimney entrance, the sack full of toys, and that famous twinkle in his eye. This wasn't just a slow evolution of a story, this was a folklore revolution.
And for a poem that had this much impact, you'd think we'd know who wrote it, right? Well, it comes with a fantastic mystery. For years, all the credit went to a serious scholar named Clement Clarke Moore, who, by the way, was kind of reluctant to admit he wrote it. But the family of another guy, Henry Livingston Jr., has always sworn that he was the real author. They point to his Dutch family background as the reason for the original reindeer names, Dunder and Bliksem, which is just Dutch for thunder and lightning. It's a literary whodunit that people still argue about today.
Okay, but the poem didn't just pull the name St. Nicholas out of thin air. It borrowed it. So to find the next piece of this puzzle, we have to jump in our time machine and go way, way back, long before any sleigh bells were ringing.
All right, let's peel back another layer and meet the actual man behind the myth. And I think you'll be surprised. He wasn't particularly jolly, he definitely didn't live at the North Pole, and he had absolutely nothing to do with elves. This is him, the historical St. Nicholas. He was a real guy, a Greek Christian bishop living way back in the 4th century in a place called Myra, which is in modern-day Turkey. He was famous, not for a big belly laugh, but for his deep faith and, most importantly, for his unbelievable generosity to people in need. And this right here, this is the core story. This is the seed of the whole legend. Nicholas heard about a man so poor he couldn't afford dowries for his 3 daughters, which at the time meant they were probably going to be sold into prostitution. So, in the dead of night, Nicholas secretly went to their house and threw a bag of gold through the window. He did this 3 times, one for each daughter. This one act of secret, life-saving generosity, that's where our gift-giving Santa Claus begins. So when you put them side by side, the transformation is just stunning. The real-life saint was this devout, modest guy in Turkey who secretly saved people from horrible situations. Our modern Santa is a super famous, jolly celebrity who lives at the North Pole and delivers toys. They share a name, and they share that spirit of giving, but pretty much everything else, totally different. But hold on, because there's another layer to this story, and it's even older. Some of Santa's most famous traits, that big white beard, the flying through the winter sky, they don't come from the poem, and they don't come from the saint. Their roots go way, way back to the world of pre-Christian pagan gods. Just take a look at this. Let's compare Santa to the head honcho of the Norse gods, Odin. The parallels are just undeniable. Odin was often described as an old man with a long white beard who would lead a ghostly procession across the sky during the midwinter festival of Yule. They even called him Jolfavar, which means Yule Father, and he rode a flying 8-legged horse named Sleipnir. So, an old man with a beard flying through the winter sky on an 8-limbed steed. Sound familiar? And if you need more proof, here it is visually.
Long before the 8 reindeer were locked in by that 1823 poem, a lot of the early drawings of St. Nicholas or Father Christmas show him riding a white horse. It's a direct echo of Odin and his horse, Sleipnir. The reindeer? They were a much later, American-made update to the story.
Even the timing and the traditions of our Christmas celebration have these ancient roots. The Romans had a massive winter festival called Saturnalia. It was a solid week of feasting, giving gifts, and just general partying that happened to end on December 25th. So later on, when Christianity was spreading, it was a pretty common tactic to place new holidays on top of existing pagan ones. It just made the switch easier for people. And the whole spirit of Saturnalia, the food, the gifts, the date, it just got absorbed right into Christmas.
And you know, this pattern of blending Christian and pre-Christian traditions isn't just a one-off thing with Santa Claus. Once you start looking for it, you see it pretty much everywhere in our modern Christmas celebrations.
That Christmas tree in your living room, it comes from pagan traditions of worshiping evergreen trees as a symbol that life continues even in the dead of winter. Holly was used by ancient Celts for the exact same reason. That pop of green was a promise that spring would eventually come back. And mistletoe? That was super sacred to the ancient Druids.
Actually, the story behind kissing under the mistletoe is so cool. In old Scandinavian tradition, it was a powerful symbol of peace. The rule was, if two enemies happened to meet under a branch of mistletoe, they had to lay down their weapons for the day and call a truce. And that gesture of peace and coming together slowly over centuries evolved into the tradition we have today.
So what does this all mean? When we look at Santa Claus, or even the Christmas holiday as a whole, we're not looking at one single unchanging story. What we're really seeing is a living piece of history, something built from countless different layers.
You can really see how it all stacks up. We started with a Santa we know today and traveled backwards in time, through that game-changing 19th century poem, back to the 4th century saint who gave him his name and his generous heart, and finally, all the way back to the ancient pagan gods and Roman parties that gave him his look and even the date on the calendar.
And that, right there, is really the big takeaway. Our traditions can feel so permanent, so timeless, but they're always changing. They borrow ideas, they blend cultures, and they transform over time. The story of Santa Claus is the perfect example. It shows us that our culture is this amazing, rich tapestry woven together from threads of so many different beliefs and stories that came before us.
Which kind of leaves us with a really fascinating thought, doesn't it? If Santa Claus could change so much in the last 200 years, what will he, and all of our other traditions, look like 2 centuries from now? What new layers are going to be added to the story next? It's something to think about.